Hey guys, how's it going? I am the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome to a new chart. We started that caveman riff chart last week, and this week we are covering how to have a nice life. And I find this chart rather interesting, and it's already one that will be very interesting for this channel because it's not like nothing I've ever covered before. This is really a chart that is about two certain people, Dan Barrett and Tim McCouga, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, my apologies, of Have a Nice Life. Now, this is a band that is critically heralded by Mew, loved by everybody, despite having one of the most upsetting, saddening, just revolting sounds in music, just in general. It's got sadder topics than the worst DSBM. And what you have here is a pretty eclectic, pretty unique band here that is very lo-fi most of the time, and all of their projects sort of delve into these topics. Now, what I like about this chart already is even though it is just projects that these two have been a part of, it covers a wide range of work. It covers really early stuff to what's going on now. What I like about this chart is its premise in the first place. I love that it covers, well, one of my favorite acts in music, and it covers everything they do. It's a very wide range of stuff you got here. It's very eclectic, even though it's just these two artists, and you can really get a good grasp on all the topics they like to talk about, the sounds they like to delve into, what's consistent with their viewpoint, and it is almost like you get to sort of look at the psyche of these two a little bit individually. This is basically a chart where you get to just see everything these two have done, and if that doesn't sound too insane to you, well, what you find here is a lot of quality. You find a lot of really good works. There's a reason that these two are covered. It's not like some random black metal guy who's in 12 different bands and not everything is good. And what's in here, you find immense variety, especially with what they have, but a couple things are basically ever present. Not a single project we're covering today has more positivity than negativity, and I think that's true for every project they do. Even at their most experimental and outlandish, you're going to find a lot of negativity, or at least dark topics. There's nothing here that is dishonest or shying away from anything. And this chart starts entirely off with what else? Have a Nice Life's Death Consciousness. This is a classic album for many reasons. First of all, it's an incredibly grand debut for a band. Starting your whole band's career with a double album is insane. Most bands will never do that. And because of this band having such a nondescript, bizarre genre to begin with, that really you only see crop up every once in a while that has any significance, with this weird combo of shoegaze and post-punk and almost post-industrial in a way, and you've just got this unearthly sense of sadness. Really, Have a Nice Life is one of the only few bands to do that. And I will say straight up, if you want a band that sort of has this angle and doubles down on the drone and doubles down on the shoegaze, then you might want to check out the Angelic Process. They are a similar band with way more obscurity. The Dragonfly of the band just passed away, and the other member of the band passed away years ago. Rest in peace to both of them. But if you want a project that is incredibly sad and has a lot of similarities, check that band out as well. That is a band that I think needs to be mentioned in the conversation of Have a Nice Life. But Have a Nice Life is a bit more clear, and what you get with Death Consciousness is a legendary piece of work that is stupidly lo-fi, and yet it works in every possible way. This album, more than anything else, is a grand display of despair and anguish and imminent and ever-present death. Literally, it's about everyone around them just dying, and it's cruel. Honestly, it's a very cruel outlook on life, and it's as cynical as it gets, and it's so bitter, and it's incredibly relatable. I mean, especially in modern times, you can see all these bitter feelings going around, and you listen to this stuff and you're like, wow, this is actually quite profound. It's not only grand in length, it is grand in concept, it is grand in variety. When you look at most double albums, say like Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins, you get a similar really grand approach. But these albums, they fall on their face because they don't have the execution that this one does. And this one is so perfectly poignant. It's so exactly direct at what it's trying to say, that even though it is so grand, it's never skewing from its meanings or of its songs. There's never a muddied perspective here. So my favorite song on here is Earth Mover, which is the epic, amazing, brutal 10-minute closer to this album. But honestly, I couldn't go anywhere without talking about some of how this stuff combines narratively. Like, you have the tracks Bloodhail and Hunter, which is basically about a hunter who all of humanity agrees that he should kill God. So they form a staircase to the sky that he climbs and shoots and kills God. And it talks about how humanity could never agree on anything in their entirety of their existence except that they should kill God. And in real life, this seems bizarrely poignant. It's really an unnerving couple of songs here, and they both sandwich The Big Gloom, which is a song about a man contemplating ending his life in an ice bath. There's not a song on here that isn't at least a little bit discomforting, especially songs like 40K, which has a really jangly opening that turns into like one of the most pummeling parts of the album. It's not without a little, and I mean a little bit of humor, which is mainly used in the song titles here, which I think this album has some of the best song titles of any album ever. It's either this or Heaven in Las Vegas has the best song titles. And I gotta mention one more time how lo-fi this record is. This thing, I believe it said it was made for $1,000, give or take. I own the CD. It was made for dirt. A lot of stuff was already owned, and I believe it was recorded all onto a computer's little peephole microphone. It sounds absurdly good for the level of recording that they had. But, I mean, just listen to it yourself. You really got to experience this thing for yourself. There are post-punk tracks. There are more ambient tracks, straight up ambient tracks. The shoegazy, hazy nature of the whole thing it's more of an aesthetic than like a genre depiction, but it's the bleak, crushing aesthetic over a very wide variety of music underneath, and it will just ruin your day. It's great. You have to check it out. And the next thing in this chart, the quickest little branch off, is Live at the Stone NYC by Have a Nice Life. This is their very first show together as a band, and you can't find it that well. You can find the audio for several tracks, but you can really only find the YouTube video link for Waiting for Black Metal Records to come in the mail. And this song is great. It's one of the two bigger post-punk tracks here, along with Deep Deep, sort of the bangers, if you will. And that track starts off with a very noisy section, but what's different about this live version is that the noise section is extended with more harsh industrial qualities, which really amplifies the performance as a whole. So if you can find the whole thing, definitely watch it. It's probably fantastic. From what I could find, I very much enjoyed it. It's really novelty as just one song. I'm sure there's some dudes on Reddit or Rate Your Music who have links to more things. Thank you to the one guy who sent me the Google Drive links, which I listened to all those songs. Most of them, give or take, are what you would expect if you have seen Have a Nice Life live footage before. It is an important piece of work here, though, and if they were selling physical copies, I would probably buy a DVD of this. And if you like the shoegaze and post-punk tracks, we go straight into the second album of theirs, The Unnatural World. It is a condensed, more shoegazy version of Death Con. It is less droney, and you got a lot more riffs. We will get into the droney stuff later, especially in relation to this album, but it is still thick and hazy. You almost have a new, fresh outlook on what the electronics are doing to bolster the album. I love the track Magic Will Untune the Sky. It's like this really cool choral drone track it's one of the most bizarre tracks here. It's sort of filled with these little skittering samples. It's really unnerving, and it's really cool. The themes of religion putting next to the themes of basically ending your life are neck and neck in terms of amount of times they show up here. And Have a Nice Life is known for both of these, but what's really cool is how much they're pointed at each other on this album. I'd say it is a less intense album than Death Con. It is more somber and calm. It's more of like a blanket rather than a harsh pain that just stabs you. This is more of a weight of dread. but you've still got some amazing hooks. You still got amazing songs. Songs like Cropsy, Opener are amazing. You know, this thing is truly a great successor to Death Consciousness. The production, of course, is upgraded, and it's great. And then you prefer the gothic rock parts and go into Sea of Worry. Now, Sea of Worry is an album that everyone will agree is the worst Have a Nice Life record, me included. Now, I do have plenty of things to say about this record because I think it is a little bit overhated. It is a total 180 for the band. It is goth rock through and through. And the production has been upgraded to a point that it's not as appealing. But there is a profound religious and existential vibe to many of these tracks. For some reason, the first few tracks to me sounded like really bland Christian rock for some reason. Sometimes the melodies that Dan Barrett writes just come up like that, but on this album, they particularly stuck out on the first few songs, which sounded better in their demo versions. I love Lords of Tressorhorn and Dracula Bells, but basically, if you look at the problems of this album, a lot of people complain about the production just being stale, which is a totally valid critique on the record as a whole, but I can't help but look at Destinos, which is like 13 minutes long, and it starts with a extended monologue from a preacher who basically explains God's act of condemning people to hell forever and how it's completely justified. And it is, I find it very haunting and in a way religiously reaffirming in a day and age where people combat these ideas a lot. It's a really bizarre way to look at it, but it's kind of logically sound as far as I can tell. And you've got like the anguish cries of "But at least I know myself" from Dan Barrett. Once the hooks come in, it's one of the dronier tracks on this album, and that's why it's worth liking a lot more. But I think that's a great song, even though there are maybe better versions of it in existence. And I think this album is good. And then the chart points out that if you like the post-punk tracks, you should turn to Married with Snow Days. This is Dan Barrett and his wife doing Christmas songs in a weird, lo-fi, Have a Nice Life way. It sounds like Have a Nice Life with a second vocalist who just so happens to be female. Yeah, the post-punk comes from the 16-minute cover of Baby It's Cold Outside, and it doesn't need to be that long. If it was 3 minutes long, it might even still be too long. The only song with both vocalists on it is Last Christmas, and that's a classic. Everybody loves it. Merry Christmas. This album's okay. It's novelty. It is as novelty as they come from both angles, from the commercialism side of Christmas being the most commercial holiday, and from Dan Barrett getting his wife to do a weird Christmas EP with him. And sure. And I'm going to take a little detour for just 1 second. We're going to go back to The Unnatural World, and we basically have ambient and drone added, and we're just going to go all the way around to the Have a Nice Life EP being Time of Land, their only EP. These are basically tracks that were recorded during the process of The Unnatural World, and instead we got heavy ambient, heavy drone, really long songs, really anguished stuff again. But honestly, it's probably my second favorite Have a Nice Life release, which ends up being one of my favorite releases on this chart as a whole. First of all, Woe Unto Us is another banger post-punk track from the band and is one of their best songs. It is never drone pacing, like you don't ever get anything that's too absurdly slow, but you get drone and sort of drone metal style volume and density. You get some insane thickness on this thing, and it is conceptually very tight. It's very specifically depressed. It's a lot more personal to me than the other Have a Nice Life records, but I think it's great. You know, you got two much dronier tracks and two much more post-punk tracks. It's a good 50-50 split, and I think the songwriting is great. Yet again, it's great. And now, back on track, I wanted to cover that because we're finishing up the Have a Nice Life material before we move on to the other bands in a few weeks. Now we're going into some B-sides with the Voids tape. Now Voids just got remastered. It is the latest Have a Nice Life drop, is the remaster of Voids. And I'll admit, I haven't listened to the original mastering because it's like a demo tape basically. But what you get here is demo songs from Death Consciousness, The Unnatural World, and yeah, even Sea of Worry, even though the original tape predates these albums by quite a bit. The first half of this are some interesting DeathCon demos, and they sound really interesting. The Waiting for Black Metal Records in the Mail is a fantastic demo, and I think one of the ones that goes toe-to-toe with the release version. As a whole, it is riffier, it's a little heavier and punchier, and I think that's a way that you could do it that's just as good. The Sea of Worry demos are insane. They sound fantastic here, and honestly, it kind of makes you wonder what was missing from the album. But you got songs on here that also just don't really exist. Mainly Sisyphus. Sisyphus is a top 5 Have a Nice Life song for me. What album would it even belong on? I couldn't really tell you, but its placement is so fantastic, and it is one of the heaviest Have a Nice Life songs. It is a slow-paced, sort of slowcore track that it builds just a little bit until you reach the I Know, and just the crushing guitars go in, and it's trading between I know and you've been pushing all day, I know, which of course is referring to the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who pushes a boulder up a hill and then has to have it roll back down, and then he has to do it all over again and repeat this process for eternity, and he can't die, which a lot of people compare it to a lot of different things in life. Some people compare it to capitalism and the workday and having to pay rent until you die. And of course, there are memes about Sisyphus where like, hey, maybe Sisyphus would enjoy it if you got a smoke break at the top. But I think it's a funny meme for a rather tragic metaphor and a great way to end this tape. Of course, the album actually ends with the Destinos demo, which I think works super well, but Sisyphus is a great way to lead into it. It's sort of like the I Don't Love off of DeathCon. Also, I'm Dr. House, also a great song. As much as it's a B-sides compilation, it's actually a rather great listening experience. And, you gotta love albums that aren't albums, but compilations, but they sound like albums. And for that, it's great. And I already had one unrated listening experience on this video today, but we're basically going to end the released material or unreleased material from Have a Nice Life with Anno Domini, collected demos between 2006 and 2014. So this isn't too long before Have a Nice Life dropped Death Consciousness, and it is after Unnatural World. It is an hour and a half long of various demos, some of which do not need to be here. For example, there is a whole Blood Hail instrumental. The Blood Hail instrumental is really cool if you cut it in half. It's too long on its own, and its placement here isn't really necessary anyway. It's a demo. It's basically stems that you don't really need unless you're, I guess, remixing something. Of course, some of these tracks, they've never dropped, so that's a really cool thing to find. And such as Sleeping Sickness, you get some really cool acoustic cuts, which are not as produced as the Giles Corey stuff, but this demo version is so cold and crushing. Honestly, Sisyphus going into the instrumental that goes into Emptiness Will Eat the Witch is amazing. Emptiness Will Eat the Witch is one of the best tracks of Unnatural World. What can I really even say about this thing? As a listening experience, it's demos, it's cool, it's very novel, and there's a lot of great music on here, but I can't really recommend it fully as a listening experience. If I had to give it an actual rating, it'd probably be like a low good. But some of these songs are amazing, really amazing, and I think it's pretty much everything here is worth checking out at some point. And next time, we're going to cover the other projects of these two. We're going to go into the stuff of theirs that isn't as much Have a Nice Life, but it's their other stuff. This is just kind of dipping your toes in right now, getting you into, honestly, my favorite part, because these are my favorite releases from the band, or rather, the members of the band. And as I'm recording this, I'm basically done with the chart, so I know what's already good and what's less good. But if you want to see what these two get up to later, stay tuned for the next video, because more than anything, they release some wild stuff outside of this project. And, that is going to be it, though. But if you guys like Have a Nice Life, how do you feel about this video? Like, dislike? Ratings are good, If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, go ahead and comment down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. What's your favorite track of Death Consciousness? What's your favorite Have a Nice Life track? should I do a top 10 Have a Nice Life tracks? I kind of want to do it. What's your top 10? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Do you like Snow Days by Married? Is it a worthwhile addition to the Dan Barrett collection? In the description down below, you got my Twitter, my Instagram, and most importantly, my music Discord page where we're posting a bunch of stuff all the time. It's fun. I posted pretty much every Have a Nice Life project, or at least Destinos from Sea of Worry. And yeah, that's about it. Have a good day. Bye.